We're all set. So I wanted to welcome Cassandra Schaeg to our Real Talk with Ryan today. And we're excited to have you, Cassandra. I've known Cassandra for several years and have watched her both progress in her business with Sip Wine and Beer in Escondido, but also in her pursuit of, as a minority-owned business, pursuit of elevating not just her business, but other minority business in the community. Her connections to people and her passion for the well-being of others is really unparalleled in my mind. And I'm excited to talk to her and introduce you to all of you and just talk through some of Cassandra's story and some of the challenges that we're hearing a lot in the news today about and how we as a community can work together to elevate everyone. So that's the objective today. And Cassandra, I'm excited for you to be here today. I have the chat box up, so if anyone wants to ask some questions, feel free to use the chat box. I'll review the questions and work them in. We'll also stop and ask questions. You're welcome to ask questions along the way. We want this to be a discussion and an idea-oriented forum. So send those chats off, and I'll be happy to incorporate them in, and we'll pause where it's appropriate. So Cassandra, thank you so much. I'd love to start by just hearing a little bit about your background. You've done so many different things. And so would you just give us a few minutes on where you've been, some of the things you've done, especially as a minority-owned business, and then how you've started SIP and why you started. It's a mouthful, but I'll let you kind of take us from there, and then we'll just talk about that in more detail.
Thank you. So I grew up in Temecula, California, and the short version is I've held a lot of jobs in my career, but the commonality is that I've worked in serving indigent communities. And I got my start working with the indigenous population on reservations throughout California. And I know there's no parallel to wine, but I spent 10 years working on reservations throughout Southern California, connecting families to resources, education, entrepreneurial resources, and then decided to go to graduate school, started working in the corporate arena, and just the short version is decided to take a risk and become an entrepreneur after moving to Escondido. And when I moved to Escondido in 2014, I recognized that I was not spending my money in Escondido because there was nothing here. And so in growing up in Temecula and seeing how the wine presence grew and understanding that Escondido was also embarking on that wine destination presence as well, I thought a wine bar would be a great asset to the community, and voila. I founded it in 2015. I pretty much self-funded my own business. It was definitely a challenging experience, but rewarding. And June 16th will be 4 years in business. And so it's evolved and it's become this organic business and platform to really elevate minority business owners, women-owned winemakers, Black-owned winemakers, and just overall helping the community as a whole in terms of if people come in and want to have discussions, if people want to come in and get information, if people want to attend events, then SIP is that communal space in order to do so.
Love it. You know, it's interesting when you talk about that. Everyone goes through their own entrepreneur experience, right? Their own idea of here's where I want to go. And then there's that taking that first step can be very, very difficult, and having the courage to do it. Is there anything that you can share with us about what moved you besides the desires, or any events or anything that said, I really need to do this, and here's why I need to do it? Tell us about that experience for you and how you came to that realization.
You know, I don't think that there's a playbook on how to be an entrepreneur, but I know that for me, my playbook was that at some point in my career, I wanted to be able to work for myself. And I have all these great ideas, ideas that I believe are great. And it was more of a testament to myself that I should just take a risk and be fearless. And so what I've recognized in this journey of being an entrepreneur and even talking to you, you just have to do it. You can't really worry about what could go right or wrong, because if you don't do it, you just never know. And I've just been, I said, it's been a ride, and even being able to connect with you to take my business to the next level, it's just one of those things where you have to trust yourself, and you have to trust the process, and you have to have a real conversation with yourself about what your strengths and weaknesses are, and reach out for help and get allies such as yourself in order to, elevate your business.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm here with Cassandra from Sip Wine and Beer. And when you start a business, there's things that you think you're going to know, and there's things you never thought you needed to know, and then things that surprise you along the way. Give us a couple things that you thought you knew that went the way you thought they would go, and some things that surprised you along the way that you never even would have thought to think about as you're going in.
The commonality that gave me the ability to move forward with was my understanding of people. And I knew that if my business was centered around people and providing an experience, then people are the priority. What I don't know, and this is even, I have a master's degree in public finance. I'm not good at counting. And so when you really talk about just the financials and the business aspect, I'm very, I guess you could say basic. Like, I understand that owning a business, a profit has to be made in order to be sustainable and to thrive, and to, in order to leverage your assets. But the finite information about that is something that I just couldn't wrap my head around. And as I was progressing in my business, and, to be quite blunt, burning the candle at both ends, because I was still working in the corporate arena and still trying to grow a business, there are a lot of things that just get lost, in that process. And so I backtrack. I remember you and your wife came in to sip, and I asked you, and I was like, what do you do? And I think I had just opened or something. I was in a good couple months, and yeah. I was like, what do you do? And you were like, oh, I do, I'm sure you'll tell them. And I was like, so I need your help. And it was, it was something that I knew that I was lacking. And so what I know is people, and I understand that people come in and want an experience, and that people come in and want to try new things, and that people want an environment where they're not judged or intimidated when they're trying new things. And that's the platform. And the reality is, I'm learning with the people who come in and learn about wine, because I don't know it all. But what I didn't know along the way was the importance of making sure that you understand the bottom line in order to grow and thrive as a small business from a financial aspect is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. You made an interesting comment there about people being so critical and your understanding of people, and then marrying that with, the actual financial information so that you can actually survive. But when you build the business and are thinking through, how do I make this an experience that's meaningful, where people don't feel judged, where they feel included, where they feel safe? We're in an environment right now where there's stuff swirling around, and everyone's trying to approach, how do I make my business relevant? How do I make my business appealing to everybody so that everyone comes in and feels safe? How do you do that? Would you recommend somebody review their current process and what they're doing, and then transform or pivot their business into something that gives them an opportunity to deliver that kind of experience to somebody?
So there's a lot of facets, especially with everything that's going on. And part of that is making sure that your product is inclusive, and that inclusivity is inclusive of everybody. And, each business owner has their own goal and mission. But for me, my business foundation is community, culture, and conversation. And that means I want the community involved. I want conversations to happen that might be difficult, that are fun, that are great, that are challenging, that are provocative, that are necessary in order to elevate the next level of our growth. And then culture, I'm a Black woman, and I respect all cultures, and I want people to know and understand who I am and what my journey looks like. And I'm going to do the same for people that come in the door. And so when you're looking at your business, there's that element of social impact, and people are being really cognizant about where they're spending their dollars. And 9 times out of 10, they're spending their dollars on people, places, and companies that align with their core values, and their morals and things that they believe in that are going to move things forward. And so I think that there's definitely an opportunity to check that and to make sure, as a company and as a business model, am I being inclusive of everybody? As a company and as a business model, am I creating an environment where people are going to feel comfortable coming in here, even if it makes me uncomfortable? And I think this is a perfect time to really evaluate that, because there's a lot of data to support the need to help minority-owned businesses. And that's why there's certifications and funding and opportunities around it. However, as the person who opened up a business and recognizing that it was, my opportunity to launch a business was grossly underfunded, I had to use my own resources in order to make that happen. And that might not be the same from other people, but it's important to share because it's a different journey, and that journey has attributed to being able to thrive. And so this is just a good opportunity for people to sit down and say, what do I need to do as an owner, as a company, as an organization, as a community, in order to make sure that people are heard and that people see people that look like themselves within that space.
That's great. I really appreciate you saying that. It's interesting because when you talk about that and you talk about an experience, and as a minority-owned business, starting from scratch and really through that hard work, developing and building a business from that. We'd love to go back to the beginning. We have a question in the chat from, we're going back to some of the work you did with Indigenous communities. And we'll take that a little step further from even disadvantaged, because I want to take it a little further than just minority business, but really disadvantaged businesses. What are some of the things you learned from dealing with those people and through your own experiences that are these key obstacles that stand in the way for businesses really being able to get off the ground and take those steps?
Well, I think I would tell myself while opening SIP, if opening a business was easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
Simple. But I also recognize that there are several inequities based on being a woman, and based on being a Black woman that would have lessened my chances of being successful as a business owner. But what I recognize is that I'm aware of that. And what I also recognize is that I took the initiative to make sure that I could eliminate those barriers as much as possible. And so part of doing that was sacrificing my own money in order to make sure that what I wanted to see happened. The other part of that was really understanding, and from working with Indigenous families and programs that are geared toward disadvantaged businesses and families, really understanding what is necessary in order to utilize those programs to thrive. And sometimes I've heard stories that it's just a double-edged sword as a business owner in general. You might have money, but you don't get capital. And, and I've been there. You might get a loan here, but it's one of those things where you really have to understand numbers in order to do so. And so the foundation of those things is really being resourceful and knowing the programs that are available to you, and using those programs to get to where you need to be. And it might be a lot of paperwork. Those programs are long and hard. I received a certification to operate in the airport, and my goal is to have a sip, wine, and beer in San Diego airport at some point in time. But that process was long and tiring. And I can understand people who would want to just throw in the towel and not want to take that step. But if you really want something, and if you really want to continue moving forward, those are the obstacles that you're going to face. And in working with Indigenous families, there are obstacles that you just cannot overlook. And Indigenous families have a significantly low completion rate in high school and college. Indigenous communities suffer from health issues. There are a number of barriers that inhibit certain communities to thrive. And if you recognize that and say, okay, so what can I do in order to eliminate that or alleviate some of that, people are going to be successful. And, I have people like you that say, hey, I need you to stick to the bottom line of making sure your business thrives. And there's also that, yes, I understand that, but I also want to make sure that I'm helping other people do that as well. And so
that's
an element.
No, great. That's an amazing point. And it's important to recognize that correlation between, the benefit you generate to the community and the bottom line. They really go hand in hand. We had a really good discussion last week with Renee from Pay It Forward Processing, who's built this mission-based, purpose-based business, right? Where she does merchant processing, which is a very simple, and I know they'll say it's more complicated than that, but a simple transactional based swipe your card and we get a fee, and transform that into an idea that, hey, when you do this, we're going to support people in the community in a meaningful way. And so now you're partaking and you're participating by using her in this community oriented business. We have a question, but I think lines right up with this. And it's, does SIP's success depend on the social behavior of you and how you're committed to advancing that cause? And how does that change in today's environment with things that are happening in the community and out in the world right now?
The answer is yes. And, I've created a brand, I've created an awareness, and I've created a mission. And that mission, prior to all of this happening, was the same. I have a web series called Wineversations where I have interviewed people like the mayor of Escondido, Paul McNamara, when he was elected. I've interviewed other entrepreneurs. I've shared the stories of people who are addressing inequities in social justice and education and entrepreneurship. And that was taking place before these things happened. And I also make it a point to be very intentional about highlighting the industry that I'm in terms of the wine and beverage industry has a lot of work to do on its inclusivity of women. And then there's another layer of its inclusivity with minority winemakers as well. And so that has always been a foundation. And if I've been fortunate to create a platform to showcase and highlight these people that are doing amazing things, and to even highlight people who have a difference of opinion and be respectful of those opinions. That's the social part where it's my responsibility to do so. And I have to say that it means for me that if standing up for helping my community means that my business suffers, that's just a risk I'm going to have to take. And I think we've seen in this short period of time that people can say one thing that will completely annihilate and wipe your business away because it doesn't align with the way people, think, feel, or believe that's going to advance a community forward. And so that will always be, I'm not going to change. What I recognize is that I have a platform to encourage and influence other people to invest in themselves, to be fearless and be an entrepreneur if they choose to connect them to people who could help them do that, to share their stories to the community and share wine. And when you really look at it, it could be said that my business is maybe not even wine and beer, but it's definitely a social component of bringing people together with that element. So my message will stay the same because that's what my message has been all along. I think this is I'm fortunate that it's elevated a little more because it's highlighting the importance of having to have even this conversation.
So interesting. I really appreciate you talking about that. I want to get into Wineversations a little bit too. You talked about, creating this platform where you're presenting, right, this very balanced approach and giving people a voice and a chance to share competing ideas, different philosophies, different thought lines over a glass of shared wine and experience. But I wanted to open up to any questions. If anyone had any questions so far that they wanted to ask, any comments that they had, now'd be a great time to ask Cassandra or ask the field of anybody, just questions about what we've talked about so far. Does anyone have any comments?
I don't know how, oh, I have to look at the chat. I see what you said.
Yeah.
Someone said,
So what do you feel like the biggest barrier that you face getting your business to running well?
Capital. Capital. You know, access to capital is extremely difficult. So I've learned. You know, it's one of those things where if you could have 1 or 2 weeks of not meeting the mark, and it could potentially, you know, make or break you as a business owner. And I think with having to be shut down due to coronavirus, I think it sheds some awareness on how stressful having a small business can be for people. I think people have watched businesses that they've grown to love have to close their doors because they just can't make it. You know, even with everything happening and getting the directive to open the doors, there's still a process that's involved. And it's funny because people have been texting and emailing like, are you opening Friday? It's like, not yet. There's a whole process involved, and, you know, access to capital will always, for me, I think is a common denominator for a lot of businesses that are in their stages of growth. And, you know, again, I don't know, I know this is like talking with Ryan, and Ryan likes to stay behind the scenes. But I think it's really important that people know and understand that when you're operating a business and you consider it your baby, that sometimes you're going to have to pass the baby off to have a different perspective and a different view. And for those who are tuning in, who obviously know Ryan, you know, the asset that Ryan has bought my business is just the ability to think about it from a different perspective and the ability to understand the numbers in a way that's going to elevate your business.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. I'm with Cassandra from Sip Wine and Beer. And Cassandra, you and I both know Donna DeBerry very well. And, you know, she's been a champion for minority causes, minority businesses. And as we've shared conversations around, and I'm going to go back to the very beginning when you talked about the work you did with Indigenous communities again. But how difficult is it, and in your experience personally, and also as you're experiencing with this, you know, a degree in government finance and dealing with different kinds of communities like this, how difficult is this access to capital problem? Because when Don and I talk, it's a serious barrier for so many disadvantaged businesses. What would be your words of wisdom or your experience in working through and trying to overcome that? Share some thoughts with us on that topic.
You know, I would say the one thing that sets probably me apart from a disadvantaged business is that I had to come to a realization of asking for help. First and foremost, you know, this is a business where you want to see your vision come to life. You don't want people messing up your business. You have people who are trying to build a business, and there has to be a level of just recognizing that you don't have it all and asking for help. And sometimes that means that help has to be individualized as it pertains to one's culture and background. There isn't a one size fits all for a business owner. And when it comes to you know, we can speak in San Diego County, the majority of the businesses affected by COVID were businesses in low to moderate income areas. And so that right there in itself lets you know that there is a special attention that needs to be paid to minority-owned businesses to continue thriving. There's also an attention to helping rebuild that community that those businesses are in, because it goes hand in hand. When you're rebuilding and helping that community is going to invest and help that business thrive by utilizing their services. And then it's a step further, because when you talk about how government works and how a city operates and thrives, their monies come from various sources, but the majority of it is from real estate and sales tax. And so, you know, when I moved to Escondido and was fortunate enough to buy my first condo, I knew that I needed to be investing in my community. And so if I'm looking around and there's nowhere to go and there's nowhere to eat and there's nothing to do, how is that going to elevate the community? And so I'm either going to be a part of the problem or I'm going to be a part of the solution. And the same is going to apply for minority-owned businesses. Like, we have to give them the support to be solution-oriented and not have to carry that weight on their shoulders of trying to grow and thrive without resources.
That's amazing. I appreciate those comments, because it's so easy to forget that we all contribute in a meaningful way to the community we live in. And a lot of times we take those resources outside of that community and wonder why our community struggles. And if we even just investing our time and our energy and our resources back into our partners who are down the street from where we live and in the community where we work, that activity promotes everyone in a positive way. So I appreciate you sharing that. We have a question here, and I want to go back to Donna, because the question here is, you know, when you started your business, how do you identify who is a good mentor or who you can select as someone that can help? And you said the thing that helped you is I needed to ask for help. And as you deal with these minority businesses or underprivileged businesses or businesses that are just generally struggling, all of us on the call want to be able to help. But how did you go through the process of selecting? Donna has extensive background doing diversity plans for some very large corporations like Starbucks and Nike, and she's currently the executive director for the Central San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce. She's very well connected. I know that was one of your mentors that you've dealt with. But talk to us how you've gone through and selected other mentors, because I know a lot of us on the call want to be someone that can help businesses who are struggling. And any advice you can give us on how someone helped you or that process you went through would be critically important.
Yeah, I've been extremely fortunate to have a number of mentors who and organizations who have been supportive of my professional career and then my entrepreneurial journey. And the Central San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce is definitely one of those organizations that has been crucial in helping me elevate my brand and spreading awareness about helping other minority small businesses. And, you know, you have Donna DeBerry, who's the president and CEO. You have Bruce Mayberry, who's the chairman. And their mission and their focus is to build generational wealth within the Black community. The data supports that, you know, generational wealth within the Black community is extremely low, and that has to change. Data shows that businesses in low to moderate income areas are not thriving and need to be rebuilt, as well as its communities. Data shows that the need for education and resources in order for people to understand how entrepreneurship works in order for them to be successful in that is vital. And, you know, when you have organizations like, you know, the Black Chamber, who are going to basically spearhead those initiatives and do, you know, the advocacy for you and help you along the way, is what's necessary. And you know, make no mistake, you know, as a Black woman, I recognize the importance of, you know, making sure that there is a sense of familiarity and understanding some of the challenges that I'm going through. But for people on this call, I think this is also a learning experience as well, to really understand the differences between how you may have started your business versus how I may have started my business, and really understanding the similarities and the differences. And I think one of the differences is going to be access. Accessibility is going to look a lot different for me than it looks for you. And be in recognizing that and just knowing that, yep, it might be a little bit easier for me to take that path, and it might be a little difficult for her to take that path, but I'm still going to do it. And I'm going to ask for help to do it. And, I have, even yourself, you didn't know me from a can of paint. You just saw me pouring wine and you're like, what do you need help with? And I'm like, help me, please, And it was like, you know what you're doing. You are in finance. You have helped several, businesses be successful. I don't think people recognize the work that you do. And I know that you're not one to definitely, showboat, but people really need to understand that, as a business owner, there are a lot of people behind the scenes making that happen. And you got to ask for help. And if anyone wants to help, part of it is by recognizing and understanding cultural differences. Part of it is sitting down and talking to business owners and really understanding where they're coming from and what they need help with, and recognizing that they don't have all the answers.
It's great. Thank you so much for that. I'm here with Cassandra from Sip Wine and Beer. Cassandra, thank you so much for all the insights and ideas and content so far. It's been fantastic, and hearing your story is inspiring. I want to take it a little bit to pivoting your business. We have a few questions about pivoting the business and moving around. And we've got a question about, adjusting and promoting your business. And so we've got some marketing people on the phone. We've got people in different industries, different space, do consulting for some businesses. And it's interesting when you start thinking about, I have to change the way I do business, whether that's because the government says these are new protocols for safety, whether that's because the market and the tastes of the market have changed, whether that's the conversation and how you have this purpose-driven idea of community. Mm-hmm. But the question I really have is two pieces. You incorporated this wineversations into your business and made it, having a discussion around wine doesn't have anything to do with having a wine bar, but it's critical really to the way your business is presented to the community. Talk a little bit about how you've done that and what promoting in your mind has worked well for you, and what other small businesses can do to perhaps add a component of that community or that purpose, mission-focused element to their business, regardless of what business space they're in. I think that's going to be critical as you move forward. So love to talk and hear about that wineversations piece, but also your ideas around promoting that business and that spirit of community that you're encompassing.
Yeah. So I came up with the idea of wineversations a couple years ago, and in the daily grind of trying to elevate SIP, and talking to a dear friend of mine, she was like, you should have launched this concept a long time ago. There's no time like the present, so get it done. And I basically took this idea, and it was, in wine, there's truth is pretty much the concept. And when you think about, you go to your friend's house and you're hanging out with people and you're opening up bottles of wine, it just generates all this discussion. People are being brutally honest, but at the end of the day, we're all respectful of everyone's opinions. And then the commonality is that this is wine that's bringing us together as well. So we're not only trying new things and different experiences, but we're also sharing those experiences. And so the vision I had for Wineversations was, if SIP were to close for any reason, I can still share a message to people that doesn't involve being in a wine bar. And so when we had to close due to COVID, the automatic thing was, okay, well, let me pivot to Wineversations so I can still share that message. And so it was, in hindsight, now that I look at it, it was a component and a plan B, because if SIP were not to be here, Wineversations could still thrive by making sure that we're still focusing on important topics and bringing that to your home, and then generating that discussion after you watch episodes, or whatever the case may be. And so when COVID started, we were doing it through like IG Live, and I was promoting the videos that we had already filmed. And prior to closing, we had a huge event at SIP for the McBride sisters. And the McBride sisters are the largest Black woman-owned winery wine business in the United States. And so I was fortunate to get them down here, and we had hundreds of people come in to hear their story. And I was fortunate to tape a segment of Wineversations with them. And then a couple weeks later, here, we're closing the doors. And so that episode was important because it really highlighted the importance of, being a woman in the wine industry, being a Black woman in the wine industry, and just really understanding how you're going to change the narrative of an industry based on your story and your purpose. And I've done other episodes as well. One important episode is a topic on diversity, inclusion, and equity. And that is, relevant today in terms of how and understanding what that looks like and why people are protesting and why people are, are being nudged to really have a different worldview when it comes to things, such as diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so I'm grateful that I was able to be forward thinking. And so when you're talking about how do you pivot, like the constant has to be, you have to be forward thinking and really understand what's happening in your environment and how you're going to adapt to that environment. And I know, when you work, I think at some point in our lives, we've always been like, well, this is the way we've always done it. And that just doesn't fly as an entrepreneur. And so from a marketing standpoint, my market was my story. My market was my purpose. And if people believed in it, welcome. If people didn't, then I was going to have to figure that out. And so as business owners, I really think that you can see the authenticity in business owners and companies and organizations that are really trying to drive the mission and the goals and the values of their business, and people will grab onto that. And that's the important piece of social impact. The first thing that pops in my head is Nike. And Nike is a company that basically, their mission is just to be disruptive in a positive way. And they're going to make that risk and sacrifice that. And as a result of that, they've seen unprecedented rewards. But that was a mission that they chose to follow. And there has to be an element of disruption in all business models in order to adjust for what happens next.
Oh, thank you. Those are excellent comments. Does anyone have any other questions for Cassandra? I've got a couple more items I want to get to, but I'd love any feedback or any group discussion anyone might have. So Cassandra, one of the things that we talked about in our session last week with Renee from Pay It Forward Processing, and we did a little bit with Sean for Managed Solutions the week before, was this idea of selection. Who are the strategic partners you want to deal with? Who are the people you bring into Wineversations? Who are the nonprofits that you support in your Swipe for Charity programs? So as you go through that process and you want to push out, here is the message. Here is the content that I want to present to create a positive social impact. What criteria do you use to select who you bring on, and what do they have to stand for to be meaningful to the community in your mind?
It's not, I think there's an element of understanding that there are people in this world, and we see it today, that we're going to have a difference of opinion. And my goal is not to be one-sided with Wineversations by any means. My goal is to hear the points of view of people who share similarities and differences, and being able to come to a consensus of, okay, here's some information or knowledge that you might not be aware of, and vice versa. And really just understanding, like, hey, it is what it is, but it's definitely a show of unity and really understanding that, regardless of what you believe in, our community is going to take us in a direction that you may or may not be comfortable with. And the question is, during this time, like, what side do you choose? And for me, it's pretty common sense. And that common sense is, I'm accepting of everyone, right or wrong. And for others, it might not be. And that's okay. but they have to understand what that impact means for them in the community that they live in. And so, you know, for time over time, we see historical things happen that show that certain behaviors have to be called out, certain behaviors have to be addressed, and they have to change. And you're either going to say, yep, that's me and I need to hold myself accountable, or no, I'm going to stay in this bubble. And you just have to accept the consequences that come from both of those things. And for me as a business owner, I'm not under any circumstances am I going to alter my values or support for my community. It's just not, it's a non-negotiable for me. And people who are on different sides feel the same way. And that's okay. It's just a non-negotiable for me. Like, I'm here to help the community. I recognize I'm focusing my attention on disadvantaged communities because that's where the attention needs to be. And it doesn't mean that I turn other people away. It means that that is my purpose, and I'm going to utilize the people who are willing to help and play a part in that, in making sure that they are successful.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Share with us what's next for SIP.
Yeah. We're trying to figure out this whole reopening and what this looks like with the new county guidelines. And so we're going to give ourselves a couple of weeks to figure that out. You know, and we might unveil a different concept that tailors, you know, to not only our wine drinkers and the people who come to our events, but there might be another component that could create a one-stop shop for people who love coming to SIP. I don't want to give out too much information because we have to, you know, sort through some things, but Wineversations will continue. And, you know, once we get the green light to kind of start, you know, we get the green light to have more filmings, and we'll definitely do that. And I'm also interested in hearing of potential guests that people think that we should bring on as well. I know, you know, politics right now is definitely a touchy subject, but you know, I interviewed our Escondido mayor when he was elected, and I've reached out to interview, you know, people on the board of supervisors. And so, you know, it's an open window and an open door for people to definitely talk about what they're doing to elevate their community. Wineversations is going to continue. You know, Sip Wine and Beer will still be here. Yeah, I'm still going to keep helping people. That's it for now.
I have one more question, and then I'll open it up to discussion from anybody who has discussion. I hear you talking about SIP and its need to stay focused on its vision for its purpose. I hear you talk about SIP and bringing people together in a way that they can elevate the community. But I also hear you talk about SIP in a way that coming out of this, it has to be somehow different to survive. Mm-hmm. It has to pivot as just not just in, oh, I'm just gonna like change my message for a minute so that I can capture what's current. But functionally change the way it operates and the way it structures so that it can survive financially. And all of us in our businesses are thinking about what we have to do to pivot and change. And so I don't want to get into a conversation about what everyone should do, because all of our pieces are so different and all of our circumstances are different, and we all are different industries and different spaces. But what is the same is that all of us are dealing with the stress of what to do and when to do it and how to deal with it, and the uncertainty of what the government says. Oh, you can do this. Oh, now you can't do this. Oh, no, you can do this. Oh, you have to do it this way. No, never mind. You got to do it this way. And this constant pivot, and then dealing with the community and the constant community pivot around where your product is really valued. So the question is, take us through your mental state of how do you cope and deal with that stress, and things that you've done to even get yourself to a spot to think through, structurally, how do I change my business? Because I know that's so taxing. So I know we'd all be very interested to hear, how have you worked through that stress to get to a spot that I've got some good ideas?
Do you see this this wall of wine here? It's
It
one way.
used to be triple. Is that what you're saying?
Um, the biggest thing about just in oneself and your goal to move forward in life is the intense mental fortitude that you need in order to block all of the fog out. People will. I didn't tell a lot of people that I opened Sip Wine and Beer until like the week before. And people were like, when did you do that? Like, what are you talking about? You just called one day and said that you opened a wine bar. And so for me, the reason why was because I was focused and I did not want to hear any negativity about what I aspired to do. And so in my growth, my circle of influence and supporters look extremely different. And when you're going through things like this, your circle of growth and influence and resources have to look similar to yours. And so when you're stressed out about what is it that you need to do financially, I know that I can call you and say, look, I don't know what to do, and I need you to help me figure this out. And the way that you get through that is by being able to have a circle of influence and support that understands what you're trying to accomplish. I'm not going to go and ask someone who owns a business, a painter, how do I open a business or how am I going to thrive? And, there's that personal discipline. And don't get me wrong, I posted something about a couple weeks ago where I hit like my wit's end about worrying about what was going to happen next. And so the overwhelming support that I received was, like, wow. And it came from a place of like, look, I was fortunate to take a risk and open this business. The government said I had to close it. If it doesn't reopen, it isn't because of me. Like, that's it. And I have to figure, like, I'm going to be okay because I recognize my value, my purpose, and what I bring to an organization or a company. And I can recover and I can get back in the workforce if I need to. There are all of these things that I can do. And that storefront isn't a testament of who I am. And so as entrepreneurs, like, everything that you've accomplished is a testament of who you are. And so the storefront was like this thing that I could see and touch, but if it wasn't there, I still know who I am and people know who I am. And so that stress is like, you know what? Sometimes you just got to let things happen. Sometimes you just got to trust the process. Sometimes you just got to recognize what's the Kenny Rogers song? You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And, there are just certain things, especially in today's climate and society, that you cannot get wrapped up in. And your mental health is important as a business owner, ultimately. And it all comes down to, like, you just need to have the right people around you. And if I said to someone, oh, I want to open a business, and they were like, what would you do that for? We don't need to talk about business because that's not where you are, and that's okay. But it's really important to have allies and a support system of people that understand where you're trying to go. And when you realize how small that group of people are when you're consistently progressing. And the hope is that more people get to that place. And so for me, it's to say, if I know that I've made it here and there's someone right here who wants to be here, help them. No question about it, help them. If someone's asking for help, that's a big deal. Help them figure it out. And so people can't just get wrapped up into all this stuff. Like, we have to look at the foundation of, like, are we healthy? Do we have a place to live? Can I pay my rent at home? If there's things that are beyond my control, or there are things that I can control. And what I can control is, like, that mental process of not letting the fog really get to you. And I'm sure people on this call who are entrepreneurs, like, know that you wake up and you're like, what in the hell am I doing today? And, and then things end up happening the way they're supposed to. So you got to keep the good people around you. You got to keep people around you who want great things to happen for themselves and others, who are committed to helping their communities, who are subject matter experts in the things that you're not expert in. Yeah, and have wine.
Have wine. Cassandra, on behalf of everyone on the call and everyone who's going to hear this after this call as we push it out, inspiring story.
Oh, thank you.
Your sense of sustaining who you are despite all these circles of pressures that you can't control, but understanding that component and staying true to that piece. We're all excited for what the future is going to be for you personally, also what the future for SIP is going to be. And we thank you so much for the story. We thank you so much for your insights and for your inspiration.
Thank you.
And we wish you the best. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
And
guys.
with that, I'll end the podcast, but I will open it up to discussion. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you.